Hello, everyone. We're going to give participants a minute or two to get here to the Zoom call, and then we will begin shortly. For those of you who are here already, welcome. Thank you so much for spending your time with us this afternoon. I'm just going to go over what's on this opening slide. Please submit your questions and any technical issues using the Q&A feature. That's how you can communicate with us. The PowerPoint presentation and a recording of this training will be available on a TEA website at this link. It says slides and videos, but that'll take you right to the grant resources page at the bottom of the page. The slides are already up and the recording will be up shortly. So you will have it as a resource. That's always our most popular question during these presentations. Where are the slides? Where can I get the PowerPoint? Will I be able to access the PowerPoint? And yes, you will. It's actually already there for you. The chat feature is active, but only for us to supply information to you. Unfortunately, we can't communicate with you. We can't hear you or receive your questions through chat, but you can ask questions through the Q&A feature. We'll give it another minute for people to arrive, not too much longer though, because we've got a lot to cover. We'll get started shortly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Amy Samet. I will be presenting to you today, and I am joined by my colleague, Christy Mazzell-James and Dale Fowler. Christy is a negotiator in the Grants Administration Division. I'm a supervisor in the Grants Administration Division. I've been a negotiator also for many years. Now I'm a supervisor. If you've been around for a very long time, it's possible we've worked together. And we have Dale Fowler with us today. Dale is from the program staff. Dale's been with TEA for 16 years, 13 of those years with the CTE program. He started out as a high school English teacher. He has 2 master's degrees, and Dale co-founded the Lewis Gregory Race Unity Symposium, which takes place at Huston-Tillotson University in Austin every spring. So we're very honored to have Dale here with us. He will be here to answer program questions when we cover that part. And then at the end of the presentation, he'll also be available for more questions. And those are your presenters. And that's the name of this session. 2023-2024 Perkins 5, Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century, Grant Application Training. And it's myself and Christy here with you today. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to TEA LEAs and reflects the TEA's current understanding of the presentation topics and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and LEAs are therefore advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. Here's our agenda for today. First, getting ready, then the SC 5003. And for those of you who are new to your positions, and I know there are many people in today's audience who are new to their positions, whenever I use an acronym that might not be familiar to you, I'm going to explain it. The SC 5003 stands for Special Collection 5003, and I'll provide more information for you when we get there. The ADC, that stands for Applicant Designation and Certification. That's a form that has to be submitted before you can open the application, which is next. We will follow that up with resources, all sorts of resources in this presentation. You will have this PowerPoint as a resource. We'll also provide for you in the chat a PDF version of the application that you can look at as an example. And then we will end with questions. Let's start with getting ready. First thing you want to do is update your information in Ask TED. Ask TED is the TEA directory of schools, and every district is responsible for ensuring that we have up-to-date information on you. Very often, a new superintendent will not get identified in Ask TED, and that becomes a problem down the road when that person submits an application. So keep your updated information in Ask TED. Make sure that all the numbers are current, that the contacts are current. It's real easy to forget in a year's time when you have new staff on board. Make sure those folks are identified. You want to be sure that you're using Chrome as your internet browser. This is different than what we used to tell you today. Use Chrome as your internet browser. You want to verify access to TEAL and to eGrants. This is another stumbling block we run into down the road, where a person who believes they are authorized to submit an application is not. So check that now. On everything we're going to share with you today, I'm going to say better sooner than later. Check it now so it doesn't become a problem closer to September 1 when the application is due. Another way to get prepared is to have a copy of your most recently approved application available. Chances are there's not going to be a whole lot of change between last year and this year, but use it as your jumping off point for your new application, for this year's application. You want to update your eGrants contact if you have new staff coming on board, or if someone has gotten married and changed their name, or you've changed phone numbers or internet providers. Just be sure everything is updated and current in your contacts. And then coordinate with others. Perkins staff will need to coordinate with staff of the ESSA program and the special education grant for the SC 5000. So always, and your business office. So you'll definitely want to be sure you're coordinating with others. Here's more information about where to find Ask TED. This is the TEA homepage. It's right on the bar across the top of the page. Find Ask TED. And then to learn more about Ask TED, how to use it, how to get an administrator logon, that is right on the face page of Ask TED. Here are some important dates for the 2023-24 Perkins 5 grant. The grant, the application itself opened today. The CLNA is only going to be pertinent for people who are brand new. And when I say people, I mean brand new charter schools, brand new districts, or grantees who are changing their designation. For example, if you were a member of a shared service arrangement and now are applying on your own, that would be a change in your CLNA. If it's going the other way, you formerly applied on your own, now you want to be a member of a shared service arrangement, you need to contact Dale Fowler so that he can open up your CLNA. There also might be a brand new district that has never participated in the program before, been around for a while, but hasn't done the Perkins grant before. They would need to contact Dale to work with him on the CLNA. Most districts, though, will not have to submit one this year. It's due every 2 years. And so this is an off year. The SC 5003, that stands for Special Collection 5003. That's the overarching form for ESSA, Perkins, and SPED that opened May 1st. That has to be completed before the ADC for Perkins will open. The Perkins ADC has been open since May 11th, and the eGrants application opened today. And all of those, all three of the lines above are due on September 1st, 2023. But please remember, sooner better than later. The link to the entitlements page is right here at the bottom of this chart. That will tell you your funding amounts. We'll talk a little now about the SC 5003, which is the Formula Grants Consolidated Schedule. You will find it under the Special Collections tab on the landing page for your district. I've circled Special Collections so you know where to look for it. The SC 5003 for the 2023-24 school year is here. And then there are some other special collection forms on this page, but just know which tab to look for it on. Sometimes just the simplest thing, knowing which tab to look on, which keystroke to make, scrolling down to the bottom of the page. Sometimes the smallest thing will get you hung up. So do know that it is a separate tab from the grants tab. The SC 5003 will have a place for you to do a pull down menu for the contact. And if your contact information is all updated, all you have to do is select the proper person from the pull down menu and you're good to go. Once it has been submitted, the application will be accessible. And you go to the Grants tab, and on the Grants tab drop down, you go to apply for eligible grants, and you will be ready to fill out your application. I'm sorry, you'll be ready to fill out your ADC. That comes first. On your ADC, this is when you tell us whether you're applying on your own, whether you're applying as a member of a shared service arrangement, or whether you are applying as the fiscal agent of a shared service arrangement, or whether you're not applying at all. LEAs with an entitlement amount less than $15,000 must join a shared service arrangement or submit a waiver form to apply independently. If you are thinking about applying through a waiver process, contact the negotiator for your region to get this form, and it must be submitted with your application when you submit. Let's look a little further into the ADC and those 4 different choices. If you're applying on your own, it means you have at least $15,000 and the grant will just involve you and your district. If you apply as a fiscal agent of a shared service arrangement, and that is most every educational service center and some schools, there are some school districts who decide that they are going to be the fiscal agent of a shared service arrangement, and they join forces with a handful of schools, a handful of other districts, and form their own shared service arrangement. Now, it's important that the fiscal agent submit their ADC before other member districts try to submit their ADC. Otherwise, there won't be anything for them to join. So if you are in the role of a fiscal agent and you are a school district, be sure to get your ADC submitted as soon as possible. The ESCs, I'm assuming, have all submitted their ADCs at this point. Let's hope. There's also a designation for not apply at all. And you may wonder, well, why do I have to tell you I'm not applying? Well, it's just like RSVPing for a party. You want TEA to know that you're not going to claim those funds, and then later on those funds will be available for others. And also, we won't keep trying to remind you to submit your application once you tell us you're not applying. The last selection is applying as a member of a shared service arrangement, and that is you won't submit an application, you'll just submit your ADC, and then the fiscal agent will apply on your behalf. Please note, the ADC designation must match the CLNA designation. And that's why you'll have to communicate with Dale if you're switching designations. In Part 2, the authorized official should review the certification and incorporation statement, complete the authorized official information, and select the Certify and Submit button to send to TEA. You would be amazed at how many times someone doesn't realize that the ADC has not been submitted and they can't open the application. So double check that before anything else, and be sure and just hit the button, not just fill out the form, but be sure to actually submit it, and then you'll be good to go. You'll be able to get to the application. And that is the path I just described. Fill out or rather, only if necessary, do the CLNA and make sure the SC 5003 has been submitted. Then you'll get your ADC. Then you can open your application. Now we're on to the application. The application requires 2 contacts. The primary contact should be someone who can answer all kinds of questions about the grant, and secondary contact should also be a person who's familiar with the grant, but we want that to be 2 different people. You can update the contact information form anytime during the year. You do not have to submit an amendment just to change the contact. Here is the TEA Career and Technical Education team. headed up by Marcette Kilgore, who is the statewide CTE director. And here you can see the friendly, smiling faces of all your program staff. We have Erica Bates, who is for Career Clusters Education and Training, Hospitality and Tourism, Human Services. We have Jennifer Bullock, who is the Career Cluster Representative for Information Technology, STEM and Manufacturing. We have Dale Fowler, who's with us today. He does the Business, Marketing, and Finance Career Cluster, the Law and Public Service Career Cluster. Lacey Freeman is Arts, AV Technology and Communication. Les Hudson, Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources, Architecture and Construction, and Energy. Steve Smith is not a CTE coordinator. He does a bunch of the labor market analysis. Of course, he's still important. And Juanita Soto, her career clusters are health science, transportation, distribution, and logistics. And Dale will be right on hand to answer program questions as I go over this next part. Oh, and here's the regional assignment for the folks that we just talked about and the email addresses. On the local HAP application, grantees are asked to give us information about the comprehensive local needs assessment, which must be completed each year. Last year, that was a requirement. And this year, when you open your application, you can hit the Copy Prior Year Data button, and it will populate your application. You can still tweak it and update it as needed, but you've got a really strong foundation for your this year program schedules. Also in the local application, you'll tell us about your program to study, about career exploration guidance and counseling provided to all students in the LEA. Part 4 is information about improving academic and technical skills of CTE students. Part 5 is about special populations and non-traditional fields. Part 6 is about work-based learning opportunities. Part 7, post-secondary credit. Part 8, recruitment, retention, and training. Part 9, performance gaps. Use the SC 5600 Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment as a reference when completing the PS 3012. Hit save at any point along the way, and a list of errors will appear if the application has not been completed correctly. This button, the list of errors, the Show Errors button is your best friend, because it'll say right here, errors and warnings. And anything that hasn't been completed tells you where to go and what to do. In this situation, this is just a sample of errors and warnings. There are errors here. It says part 1, line 3, you must complete this required field. Part 6, line 2, you must select at least one of the checkboxes or provide an other entry. So very clear instructions for you, and know that you can save at any time. You don't have to sit down and complete the whole thing all in one sitting. Important note, there's a difference between errors and warnings. If you've made an error in your application, you will not be able to submit it until the error is corrected. But if you have a warning, it's more of an alert. You may need to attend to a situation or be sure that you've done something correctly, but could be that you're good to go, and it will not stop you from submitting your application. So that's a big difference between an error and a warning. There's also a section on accountability. Now, the question has not been filled in this chart. All I'm trying to show you here is that there are columns on the right, and if they are gray, you do not need to enter anything in those fields because your school has met the target, or rather your district has met the target. If the area is white, you must explain why the actual percentage for 2018, 2019 was less than statewide target percent, and you must describe the strategies the LEA will use to improve CTE student performance. This can be the most simple explanation, like we didn't hit our target because the program was not well publicized, and the strategy can be we will do more to publicize this program. Very simple, but there must be words in the field. And then a couple of questions about accountability. You're describing district programs designed to enable special population students to meet Perkins performance targets, and describe the process for evaluating the program and the district performance. Before we go on to the budget, since we have Dale with us, I believe we can take questions. And Dale is here to receive those. So I need to check the. Okay, looks like. Can you see these, Dale?
I don't, but I can open it up and see. Yes.
Go hit that Q&A.
Yes. Where are we going to start?
I believe the first one says, I know I emailed this in earlier this morning, but it may help others.
Okay.
We have a school that stood on their own, but now need to join the SSA due to their planning amount. Do they just amend their CLNA to say joining with SSA? Their CLNA would already be fully completed since they completed on their own last year. Thanks.
That's an interesting question. The SSA information that would be completed would be for the whole group, and so there may need to be some reference to what the SSA's performance measures and goals are. So there may need to be some coordination between the district joining the SSA and the other members, especially the fiscal agent, to be sure that what the SSA and the new district joining the SSA are in sync with their goals and performance measures and so on.
Okay. Next question is, how does TEA determine the planning amount?
Planning amount, I can't give you all the details, but generally speaking, the planning amount is based on student population in a given geographical region of the state, zip code, and so on. And it's not just how many CTE students do you have, but it's based on the latest census data. So that would be 2020. Latest census data, and it's done by the Department of Ed, or at least the funding amounts are determined in that way. And the criteria is, as I said, not just CTE students, but it's the number of students living in poverty is defined by the federal government that are up to the age of 16. There's an age requirement I'm not quite sure of, but it does require that count be made from the census, and based on the number of students who are deemed to be in need of the right age range, that's how the allotment is made.
Okay, great information, Dale. Thank you so much. I forgot to mention that we were going to limit Dale's answers at this point in the presentation. He'll come back at the end and we'll come back to these questions. I don't want to squeeze into Christy's time to cover the budget. So I'm going to bring Christy back and we'll bring Dale back at the end of our session. So here's Christy James, my colleague who's been with TEA for a few years, started out as a CARES negotiator and is now a full-time long-term TEA grant negotiator for all kinds of grants. Here's Christy.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon. So I'm going to go over the budget and also some excellent TEA website resources. Starting with the Program Budget Summary, BS 6001 Program Budget Summary. This is the first page of the budget that you will need to fill out. Once this is filled out, then the other budget schedules, the supporting budget schedules, will be populated with the amount that you've budgeted for that class object code. So, on the left is an example from eGrants. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at that. We're going to look at Part 1, available funding, in this top section, and we'll also look at Part 2A, budgeted cost, in the lower section. And then on the next slide, we'll look at Part 2B. Okay. BS 6001, this is the budget summary. So you will see your final amount on line 3. In this case, the LEA's final amount is $781,583. You won't see a carryover amount. Carryover is not allowable in Perkins. The line 5 is for reallocation. You won't see that until December or January, and TEA will enter that for you. Then the bottom line of this top section, total funds available, $781,583. And this will be your LEA's entitlement amount. Let's look down at the program, at the budget summary, Part A, budgeted cost. So this is where the applicant can enter amounts for each of the class object codes. For example, line 2, payroll cost, class object code 6100. The LEA has entered $5,000. On line 3, professional contracted services, class object code 6200. The LEA has entered $50,000. Then the other class object codes are here: supplies and materials, other operating costs, debt services, capital outlay, and operating transfers out. Then the form totals the direct costs for you, and in this case, it totals to be $755,000. Then on line 9, you can enter indirect cost if you'd like to. In this case, they've entered $26,583. And then the form totals all of the budgeted cost, and that's $781,583. And I'm going to scroll up just a little bit because that number will match the total funds available, the entitlement. And I'm going to scroll right back down to show you this red 0 on the second to last line of this form. This is total funds available minus total cost. So this number starts out being the entitlement amount. And as you budget amounts into each class object code, the entitlement amount whittles down. And when the red number is 0, you have finished the schedule, and you need to remember to save the schedule. And when you do, all of these amounts will auto-populate onto the supporting budget schedules. So let's look at the supporting budget schedules. First, there's BS. Whoops, it didn't change. There it is. Budget schedule 6101, payroll cost. So on this, we're going to look at part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. I'm going to magnify it so we can see a little bit better. I apologize for the small print. So in part 1, total payroll cost, this is what will auto-populate from the budget summary. This is the amount that you have to work with on this schedule. Part 2, number and type of positions. This is for administrative support or clerical staff that is integral to the program. So this is the position type. It's already described for you. And out here, you will need to insert the number of positions next to the red arrow. Please don't enter the amount of funding that you're dedicating to this position. Needs to be the number of positions. Then I'm going to scroll down so we can look at sections B, C, and part 3. For these positions, you will simply check the box to indicate that funds will be spent on that line. So section B is for LEA positions, such as professional staff, paraprofessionals, administrative support, or clerical staff paid by LEA in direct cost. So you just checked the box to indicate that you're going to use funds for those positions. You have the same positions for campus positions. And then in part 3, these are for, this section is for substitute, extra duty benefits, extra pay and benefits. And say in this situation, the grantee selected line 3, substitutes for public and charter school teachers not indicated above. Just check the box. Funds are going to be used for this purpose. And then last of all, on this schedule, please remember to check the confirmation of payroll requirements and read it carefully to make sure that you are complying. Going to the next, supporting budget schedule. This is the BS 6201, professional and contracted services. We're going to look at part 1 and part 2. Part 1's the top part 2 is the bottom part, and I will magnify that just a little. Okay, part 1, professional and contracted services. Budgeted cost. Well, first of all, the $50,000 on the last line of this first section is what auto-populates from the budget summary. And then you can distribute the funds however you need to do. Line 1 is for rental or lease of buildings, space in buildings or land. And this is for a little bit, it's not for meetings or say you're going to need space for a conference for a couple of days. This is for, say you need an office for a staff member for a half of a year or the entire year. So that's what this line is for. Now, if you're going to have, if you need to rent temporary space for trainings or meetings, you budget that. Down here, the second to the bottom line, remaining 6,200 costs that do not require specific approval. So recapping what I said, if it's a longer term rental, it goes on line 1. If it's shorter term, it goes on remaining 6,200 costs that do not require specific approval. And then on this form, line 2 is for professional and consulting services. And I will say that, especially on this form, please check the budgeting cost guidance handbook, and I'll show you a link to that on the resources page at the end of this presentation. BS 6301, supplies and materials. There is no BS 631 on the Perkins application. Supplies and materials do not require specific approval. Simply budget the amount in the budget summary. And please remember that BS 6301 is for items with a per unit cost of less than $5,000 or less than the capitalization level established by the LEA. Now we're on to budget schedule 6401, other operating cost. So line 1 is for out-of-state travel for employees. The LEA must keep documentation locally. Line 2 of this is for travel for students to conferences. Pre-authorization is required in writing, and this does not include field trips because field trips is on the next line, educational field trips. The LEA must keep documentation locally. And then lines 4 through 7 are unallowable for this grant. And as I showed you that out-of-state travel is on line 1. For in-state travel for employees, you would budget that on the second to the last line of this schedule, remaining 6,400 costs that do not require specific approval. And then the total of other operating costs, of course, this would be auto-populated from the budget summary BS 6001. Now, this last bullet point, a new process has been established for obtaining pre-authorization. Please see the forms for prior approval, disclosure, and justification webpage. And I will show you that when we get to the resources. Oops. Okay, I have to recalibrate here. Give me a moment. Okay. There. BS 6501, debt services. To allow grantees to budget subscription-based information technology arrangements, SBITA, cost for terms greater than 12 months, TEA has revised the BS 6501 debt services schedule. A universal errata was issued on April 3rd, 2023. It's posted on the grant opportunities page. And when you review these slides for this presentation, that you will find that this is a live link to get to that errata. Subscription-based information technology arrangements, SBITA, may include cloud computing, such as online software, online curriculum, online databases. It could also include service contracts, routine maintenance, minor updates. Generally, these subscriptions are for more than 1 year and fewer than 5 years. And this is the new eGrants page for SBITAs. Okay, I'm going to magnify that so we can look at it a little closer. All right, we're going to look at part 1 and part 2. Part 1, subscription-based information technology arrangements, SBITA, and capital lease liability cost. This is the place where you will put the budgeted cost for what you will spend on the SBITA during the grant period. So line 1 is for the SBITA liability principal, and line 2 is for the SBITA liability interest. Part 2 is a little different. You will need to put the description of the SBITA in here on line 1, and then you will use the drop down to select Perkins as the fund source. Then you will need to put in the contract start date and the contract end date. So let's just say, for example, this could be a 2-year SBITA that your LEA is paying for. So you would put the first, let's say that the contract begins at the beginning of this grant period, but then it ends 1 year out, 1 year and an additional year beyond the grant period's end date. So you'd put those dates in there. And then the subscription cost would be the total amount that you will be paying for those 2 years. So that's the difference between what you would enter here. This is the 2-year period or whatever period for the entire contract. And then in this part, these are the amounts for the grant period. Capital outlay. We'll be looking at part 1, capital expenditures, and then part 2, where furniture, equipment, vehicles, or software are itemized. And I will enlarge that. So once again, the amount that you entered for capital outlay on the budget summary will appear in this top section on the bottom line, total capital outlay cost. The grantee budgeted $100,000 for that, and then you can distribute the funds where you need to. Line 1 is for library books and media. Line 2 is for capital expenditures for additions, improvements, or modifications to capital assets, which materially increase their value for useful life. This is not for ordinary repairs or maintenance. Line 3 is for furniture, equipment, vehicles, or software cost for items in part 2. So part 2 is where you will itemize the items from line 3. So scrolling down just a little, let's look at item number 1. The generic description is mobile simulation oxygen lab cart. Please don't use brand names on this line and don't identify the vendor, just a generic description. The fund source, you'll use the drop-down menu to select Perkins. I think it will be the only source on there. And then you will fill in the number of units. And then you'll notice that the last line, a description of how the item will be used to accomplish the objective of the program, that line is grayed out, so you won't need to do anything there. And then I'm going to scroll down a little more. If there are not enough places to put your various items, you can use the Add Item button at the bottom. BS 6020, required uses of funds. Okay. So we're going to look at part 1, part 2A, and part 2B, which is on the next slide. Class object totals from BS 6001, the budget summary, will auto-populate in this part 1. So you see that under payroll, the LEA had entered $5,000 in that class object code. It transferred from the budget summary to this schedule. Professional contracted services, supplies and materials, and so on. And indirect cost goes in here as well. And then the total budgeted cost will match the entitlement amount and the final amount on the budget summary. Now let's look at part 2. Funds must be budgeted in all 6 rows of part 2A to meet funding requirements. So here are uses of Perkins funds, 6 of them. And then let's look at an example. So I will enlarge this so we can see a little better. So for line 1, the use is to provide career exploration and career development activities. So the grantee is funding that with $20,000 from supplies and materials, $50,000 from other operating cost, $20,000 from capital outlay. The subtotal of those amounts is $90,000, and that totals to 11.92% of the total uses of funds. Then let's look at another example, line 2, provide professional development. $5,000 will come from payroll, $5,000 from supplies and materials, $100,000 from other operating costs, and that totals to be $110,000. Now I'm going to scroll down. Okay, so the subtotals of each class object code appears on this line, and then local uses of Perkins funds subtotal. So this line subtotals all of the class object codes, and then the indirect cost is added in to get the total budgeted cost, $781,583. And that is the entitlement amount. Now, so that was part 1 and 2A. Now we're going to look at 2B. So here's 1, here's 2, and then here's 2B. Reading this bullet point to the right, if funds are not budgeted for all 6 required uses of funds in Part 2A, in this Part 2A, if they're not budgeted there, then they must be addressed in this Part 2B, which is uses of state and local funds. So this Part A is uses of Perkins funds, and Part B is uses of state and local funds. And now, the most important part, to remember to certify and submit the application when you have completed it. You would not believe how many people forget this. And I understand, because I think sometimes it just gets lost in the chain of people who need to review the application before it gets submitted. And then finally it gets to the grantee official, or sometimes it doesn't make it that far. But if you are in on filling out this application in the early stages, just try to ensure that it gets certified and submitted in the end. So the certify and submit button will appear on the table of contents page, and then there is another certify and submit. It will take you to the GS 2000, and you will certify and submit it again. Streamlined review process. TEA's Grants Administration Division is continually evaluating and refining its processes to ensure grants are awarded in a timely manner. Negotiators are now conducting a streamlined review of applications to ensure that they are in substantially approvable form and can be awarded. After grants are awarded, they may go through post-award compliance review. And some of you may have experienced that last year. Post-award compliance review would get in touch with you and direct you on what to amend and how to amend it. Resources. '23-24 federal grant programs, important dates. The ESSA, the SPED, the Perkins, they're all out there for you to apply for now. All of the parts are available. The important date to remember now is September 1st, 2023. Please get your applications in as soon as you can. So briefly, we're going to go over some of the resources And so this is easily accessible. This page is easily accessible from the website. And in fact, and on the right-hand side of this page, you find all kinds of great resources, grant basics, applying for a grant, administering a grant, amending an application, expenditure reporting, grant resources, compliance reporting, monitoring, information, all kinds of information available from this page. And we're going to look at the grant resources page. And if you're using the slides, you can directly access that from this link. Here we are. In fact, I'll show you very quickly how to get there. If you are on TEA's homepage, landing page, go to Financing Grants, go to Grants Administration, click on that, and here's that page, the Grants Administration landing page. And then we want to look at grant resources. So on this page, this right-hand strip is essentially the same as the other page, but look how much information is there. There are FAQs. Sometimes that can answer your question. The entitlements can be reached from this page. The budgeting costs guidance handbook that I mentioned earlier, you should definitely read that. And then you can also access the forms for prior approval, disclosure, and justification from this page. Now, looking on the left-hand side, popular resources, some of the same things, e-grants, roles, we get lots of calls about that. Fiscal support, guidance, all of these are links to things that everyone needs to know when they're dealing with these grants. Trainings and video resources. Here are some important things, especially for new people: how to request access to TIL, how to request access to e-grants, how to add, edit, or remove contacts in e-grants. And then, well, the training registrations are a little out of date as of this past hour. But here's where you'll find those training slides. At the bottom of this resources page, the ESSA, the SPED, and the Perkins slides are already uploaded, and coming soon, we will have the training videos there. And then last of all, I wanted to show you on this right-hand side, the contact information, division contacts. That is the administration, the grant negotiators that you may need to contact at some point. So in this first section are the ESSA, SPED, and Perkins negotiators. And then in the bottom part of this top part are the ESSER negotiators, our regions that we work with, our emails, and our phone numbers. And then at the bottom, expenditure reporting contacts, the non-ESSER fiscal coordinators and the ESSER ER fiscal coordinators, their email addresses and their phone numbers. So there is so much information available on the website, and I hope you remember to use that. Okay. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Samet, and she will answer some of your questions.
Great job, Christy. Thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes left for questions. I'm going to see what we've got here. We've got a question on 3350. Are the questions, which year of data are the questions addressing? I assume 21, 22, but it appears some are grayed out. That must be using 2021 data. I wonder if Dale can answer that question.
There's a lag. That is correct.
Okay. The next question I see here is when I try to copy my last year's data, it says no prior year data to copy. Please advise. I'm going to recommend you reach out to your negotiator who will be able to open your application or walk with you. Offhand, I can't tell what the problem is, but you'll need somebody to go into your application. Tammy, we'll get with you on that. Next question was, what if CLNA data was submitted last year and the copy prior year data does not import? That's another great question that we'd have to get with you on your personal situation. How are STEM units a capital outlay? Do you understand that question, Dale? How are STEM units?
Are you talking, if they're talking about equipment and resources, microscopes, maker spaces, whatever goes into a STEM work-based learning or work site, something connected with having a STEM program. Yes, so the question is it legitimate? I would think so. Would there be capital outlay? Then it would need to meet the definition of what capital outlay is. And you know better than I about that.
Okay. I see Mona. Mona's answering the question live. Go, Mona.
Sorry, I was not. I was managing the questions for you.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't see the rest of the sentence there. I'm going to go on to the where do we find the links. This presentation will be in the grant resources, and you'll scroll down to where it says copies of the slides and copies of the training, and you'll be able to access everything through the presentation. Can you attach the link to the negotiator contact page to the chat? I believe one of my colleagues can do that. It's on the grant resources page on the right-hand side, just in case they're not able to put it in the chat for you. And are we at 226, 227? 2 of our districts have added high schools this past year, and they now have entitlements. However, there is no CLNA available for them to complete under special collections. Well, it doesn't go by high school, it goes by district. It's your district has to submit a CLNA. Dale, what do you think about that?
Yes, the district has to submit the CLNA, and so it would just be based on what the district data was, and they should have a CLNA.
And they should reach out to you to update the one that they have currently?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Sounds like a plan. Please answer the question, what constitutes capital outlay is what the person is asking. I don't believe either Chrissy or I mentioned the Budgeting Costs Guidance Handbook, which is an outstanding resource for you that has the definition of capital outlay in it. If you go to the grant opportunities page, which is mostly orange, there's a left-hand menu, and about the 4th or 5th item down is the Budgeting Costs Guidance Handbook. You can do a word search for capital outlay, and there is a clear definition. It's going to be over $5,000 per unit, or according to the capitalization threshold for the district. Do we have 60 seconds left? Okay, I'm really glad this last question came up. You mentioned paying for a multi-year subscription. I thought money had to be spent within the grant year. That is exactly true. You can have a multi-year subscription, but you're going to isolate and identify the part of that subscription that falls during the grant period, and that is what you're going to pay for with your Perkins funds. So on the 6501 schedule, in the top half, you're going to tell us how much of your Perkins budget you are dedicating to that SBITA for the grant period. And in the bottom half of that page, you're going to describe the full subscription. So it's 2 different pieces of information, but the only one that you're budgeting for is the top one. The rest is just information that we're collecting. You have the subscription, you're just not budgeting for the whole thing this year. This year, you're paying for the part of the subscription that's during the grant period and the interest on it. Okay, I believe we are at 2:30. Oh, so I'm going to end by thanking you all so much for your time. We're still here to answer your questions. The website's still here with excellent resources for you. You can reach out to Dale. You can reach out to me and Christy and to your negotiator. And again, the website 24/7 available for you, chock full of resources. Thank you so much for spending this time with us this afternoon. And we'll see you next year.